Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Good lady has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I guess I would contest some of the assertions made in the presentation here. But going over this bill, I felt a little bit like I was back in law school taking an issue spotting exam where they give you one of those hypotheticals and you have to, spot the 16 reasons why this might be unconstitutional. I think this would lend itself very well to a future law school exam if any law school professors out there are listening. But to begin with, I'm just going to go on some of them. But the First Amendment, I think we got a real First Amendment problem here. A statute is per se constitutionally overbroad, unconstitutionally overbroad, if it extends to activities that are presumptively protected by the First Amendment. Obscenity is not protected, but I think it's important to note that this proposed bill goes so far beyond obscenity. Obscenity has been well understood for decades to be not a First Amendment protected activity. Obscenity is already illegal in Idaho. This bill is seeking to go far, far, far beyond any constitutional, legally understood concept of obscenity. This bill goes after, and I'm using the language from the bill, sexually provocative dances or gestures performed with accessories that exaggerate male or female primary or secondary sexual characteristics. Contrary to what the good gentleman said, this language on its face could cover cheerleading routines. It could cover performances of musicals like Grease or Rent or any number of mainstream shows that we've all seen, Les Mis. It could cover Lady Gaga and Madonna concerts. It could cover high school dance troupes, jazz routines, hip-hop routines. I'm going to break it down a little bit. Let's look at the language of sexually provocative. Highly, highly subjective. If you ask 50 people what is sexually provocative, I think you will get 50 different answers. Dance moves involving hip wiggling or pelvic thrusts. Again, an Elvis impersonator, I think, would pretty clearly fall within the bounds of something that people could call sexually provocative. Most standard dance moves that you would see at a concert or a show would be characterized or could be characterized easily as sexually provocative. Accessories that exaggerate male or female primary or secondary sexual characteristics. Again, this is hardly a legal term of art. I have not found anybody who can give me a clean read of what a secondary sexual characteristic is. The body parts, I guess genitalia, we're clearly going far beyond that. But this could be lots of things. This could be a bra, a padded bra, a tight shirt that accentuates musculature, leggings that accentuate musculature. There are any number of things that a person could say is an accessory that accentuates a secondary sexual characteristic or even a primary. So essentially this section covers an almost infinite array of First Amendment protected mainstream activity. And we are basically creating something that could prohibit the entire world almost of performing arts. So let's look at what the supposed safety catch here is as to why we're not just banning all performances. It's this community standards language, right? It's the language that says it has to be patently offensive to an average person applying contemporary community standards in the adult community. This is totally subjective, and this is clear. There's Idaho case law on this. This is in the eye of the jury. It is the jury that decides what is violative of this. Now, to be clear, this standard has never been found to be constitutionally applied in anything but an obscenity context, which this is not. But there was actually a case once where the same movie was ruled on in two different cases in the same courthouse in the same town, and in one case it was found obscene, and 2 weeks later it was found not obscene. That is how subjective it is. It is entirely in the hands of that jury that day on what they determine is obscene. Now, again, we're not talking about obscenity here. We're talking about what somebody thinks is sexually provocative in a way that is offensive to the community. This is as subjective can be. Nobody in this room can possibly predict how this will play out. Moreover, nobody in this room can possibly predict, because it's a civil enforcement mechanism, how a plaintiff's attorney would choose to bring a case on this. And again, if I didn't know better, I would think this bill was brought by the plaintiff's bar because it opens such an infinite array of civil litigation here. Anybody who goes to a show and any enterprising plaintiff's lawyer can say, you know what, I think I saw somebody wiggling their pelvis a bit. There were some kids in the audience. I see big money. I could get $10 million out of this case. So really, I don't think anybody in this room, including myself, can predict how this would ever be applied in terms of who would think what is sexually productive, who would think is a forbidden accessory, who is going to be the arbiter of what community standards are in terms of what's offensive. It is whoever whoever happened to get the phone call to be on the jury that day. That is to whom we are going to be entrusting our First Amendment rights. So this is extremely concerning. I don't think as a ban, and again, I think it also raises Fifth Amendment concerns, because you've got a due process problem where you're exposing people to this kind of a threat without any clear understanding of what activity is actually being banned. But the interesting thing here is that it's not a ban. Well, at least the first part of the bill is not a ban. It's a civil enforcement mechanism. And I want to talk about that for a second, because this has been the vogue sweeping the nation ever since Texas passed its abortion bounty law back when Roe v. Wade was still in effect, and they couldn't ban abortion. And so they said, ha-ha, we won't ban it. We will just create a civil bounty vigilante provision where any family member can sue for $10,000. And that way we're not really banning it. We're just opening it up to vigilantes out there in the public who want to bring civil actions. And of course, Idaho followed suit. To be clear, this little end run around civil liberties has not been blessed by the Supreme Court. They declined to take that case out of Texas. But they have not said you can just run roughshod over First Amendment, Fifth Amendment rights as long as you call it a civil enforcement mechanism instead of an actual ban. And let's talk about that in the context of other laws. Let's say we said something saying, well, we're not going to ban your right to practice your religion. We're just going to say that anybody who sees you walking into church can sue you for $10,000. We're not going to ban your ability to own guns. We're just going to say that anybody who sees you with a gun can sue you for $10,000. There is no way that our founding fathers intended to create a loophole to the Bill of Rights that you could drive 10 trucks through. This is not going to hold up. When this gets addressed square on by the Supreme Court, this will be stricken down. There is no way you can just freely abridge basic constitutional rights by calling it a civil action instead of an outright ban. So I think this is not the magic dust that people think it is in terms of being able to ban things you can't ban. So ultimately, I don't see this bill making it in a legal framework. But let's just say it did. We have a Supreme Court right now that has shown a willingness to, overturn sometimes decades-long precedents. So let's say they say, fine, you can do this. It's legal. So that gets us to the next question of, is it a good idea? It is not. This is a terrible idea. This bill spells death to our performing arts industry because, and they are terrified. They are pulling together some advocacy, and I think we'll be hearing from them more in upcoming weeks. They don't see how they will be able to function. We will not be able to get visiting Broadway shows. We will not be able to get ballets and opera and all these things because the risk is far too great. Let me tell you as a lawyer who's practiced in the private sector for 26 years what this looks like. So let's say they're thinking about coming here. They want to put on a show of Grease. And we know Grease, the John Travolta character, is going to be in a tight jacket. People are going to be wiggling. There's some pelvic thrusting in the dancing. Clearly things that somebody could say sexually provocative. And an enterprising plaintiff lawyer could certainly say that there's, sexy attire. Or maybe the Olivia Newton-John character is going to be wearing a padded bra. Who knows what. So there's certainly a possibility that somebody could come out and bring a lawsuit for millions and millions of dollars for all of the minors that were in the audience. You think those producers are going to say, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure whatever jury they pull that day will understand that we're in keeping with the community standards. That is not how the world works. They're not going to take a flyer and expose a risk of millions and millions of dollars on the hopes that a reasonable jury is picked that day. Their insurers are going to say, forget it. We're not insuring you to perform in Idaho. People are not going to put these shows on because the risks are going to be so extreme of almost unlimited liability. And actually, another point I want to make is the second part of this bill doesn't even let you off the hook if you're barring children. You simply can't put on the shows anywhere in any public facility, even if it's only adults, which is like 90% of the venues in this state. You simply can't put on a show that has any kind of sexually provocative dance moves or anything in any high school auditorium, college auditorium, the Morrison Center, any park. So in terms of neutral time, place, and manner restrictions, this would not meet that test. It does not leave enough venues where these activities could actually take place. There would be very few places where even adults could go see anything, frankly. Forget the kids. And plus, just as a parental rights issue, why treat all kids the same? A 17-year-old can go see Grease. And just assuming that maybe you don't think it's the right thing for a 4-year-old, but why aren't we letting parents make those decisions of what shows they think their kids should be able to see? Here, parental permission is not an excuse. The producer's still going to get sued for millions and millions of dollars, even if the parents are completely okay with the show. So the chilling effect it's more than a chilling effect. This is a liquid nitrogen deep freeze we're putting on the performing arts industry. And this is just a terrible, terrible direction for Idaho to be moving in. I'm sure this is not the intent, but it is going to be the result. When people in the performing arts industry see the kind of staggering liability that they're facing with basically no protection, the only protection they have is the hope that the random people picked on the jury that day are going to see community standards in the way that we hope they'll see them. This legislature has zero control over how that's going to play out. And what the plaintiff's bar is going to think of this and what any jury on any given day, how they're going to apply it. And the result is that people are not going to want to roll the dice. And actually, by the way, the public facilities version, that's actually a criminal penalty. So you better believe that high schools are not going to be willing to put on shows where there's any dance move that anybody in their wildest dreams could think constitutes a hip wiggle, because they're looking at 5 years in prison if they guess wrong. So this is a death knell for the performing arts. This is going so far beyond whatever stated desire to protect children from bad things. This is crippling to culture in Idaho. And I urge you to give it your red light. I hear so many times, don't turn Idaho into Portland, don't turn Idaho into San Francisco. Well, I'm asking you, don't turn Idaho into Iran, don't turn Idaho into Afghanistan.